obvious reasons, the atmosphere at this year's Davos meeting of global leaders was decidedly gloomy. Indeed, many spoke of the global patient being in intensive care. And it wasn't just about the economy.
There was a study this week released by an international panel saying that it will take 1,000 years for the temperature of the Earth to cool, even if we reduce greenhouse gases by 80% by 2050. And I worry that we still have too many people who believe that the only way to reduce greenhouse gases is to slow economic growth. We will never get an agreement in Copenhagen unless we have a sense that from the poorest countries to the wealthiest, there are economically beneficial ways to dramatically change the energy patterns of the world.
My friends in the new administration say to a person that when the new administration gathers to discuss these options, the greenest person in the room is President Obama. He is pushing hard for a dramatic and bold move in the right direction. If other governments around the world do the same, then we can make this turn toward a low-carbon future. We're running out of time. We have overshot the target. We are already above. We have 386 parts per million in the atmosphere today. The Greenland and West Antarctica have the potential to each raise sea level by 20 feet. The third largest mass of ice in the Himalayas is threatening the 50% of the fresh water supply for 1.4 billion people in the world.
If the United States administration can come to Copenhagen in December with legislation that says we are going to make a commitment, that we are in a much better position to ask more from the developing nations. Is that
absolutely to it? And for the first time, we now have a Congress that gets it. Speaker Pelosi fully understands it. Majority Leader Reid fully understands it in the Senate. And we have the votes. Those are the sweetest words in the English language in my experience. But if we don't market it right and structure it right, let me share with you the world I live in, and it is this. The opponents, the skeptics of lethal overheating, you can call it global, don't call it global warming, call it global overheating. I can get that, I'm closer there. And also throw in acidification, because the skeptics have all packaged their arguments and say, well, temperatures come and go. But ocean acidification, friends, is demonstrable in a lab. You can, in a lab, put CO2 above water, watch the water dissolve the CO2, the water becomes more acidic water takes up carbonate, carbonate's not available for shelled organisms, death of oceans, end of oxygen, game over. We can do that. So focus always on acidification.
We better not do that.
But we are doing it, but we have to do it in our rhetoric. Now, here's the world we live in, and we have to prepare for it. If the argument can be made that your power bills will go up, here's my world. At a time when the American economy faces severe crisis, Congressman Brian Baird voted to increase your power bills and raise the cost of gasoline.
You have a career in voiceovers.
Yeah, and the problem is we have to be able to beat that. I think we can, but I think we need to be very strategic about how we do it. And the arguments of you can actually lower costs, create jobs, and reduce lethal overheating. That has to be at the forefront. And my own belief is we should set a worldwide, certainly industrialized world, and I know we can do this in the United States, of 20% reduction in 20 weeks. I'll say it again, 20% reduction in 20 weeks. Now, my hunch is people would say, that's preposterous, nobody talks about that. I would just ask you to walk through your daily life and see if you can't find 20% reduction in how much energy used to shower, how much energy used for transportation, the lighting in your office, etc. It is quite achievable in that time frame and would have profound benefits. It would immediately put money back in the pocket. If we had 20% reduction in energy expense, the stimulus would be obviated.
But what was the reaction of the business leaders to these ideas?
And if we believe in an equitable world in this century, that would mean that we can consume, each of us, 1 ton of carbon per year, basically. What does that equate to? Well, it means that every day we have to decide if we're you're going to buy the t-shirt this day, eat, or alternatively eat a hot meal, or maybe drive your car 20 kilometers. That's the task. It's a monumental task, which means that it's a complete rebuild of our society that we have to do. So that there are no quick fixes. And there are so much investment that needs to be done. And almost all of that investment needs to come from business, from the private sector. And the private sector can deliver that, as I said in my earlier statement. But the private sector need to be able to create value to do that. So if they are able to do profits, which is value, there has to be a price on carbon. And the price on carbon comes from that we set a cap, that we get scarcity value. And if we have scarcity value and a cap, then there is a price. And if there is a price, we can trade. And if we trade, we can minimize the cost, because that resource allocation in the world. And that's why it's so fundamentally important. And if we turn it into an opportunity, it's the biggest opportunity since the rebuild of the world after the Second World.
The hope, obviously I'm a biased capitalist. I strongly believe that if the framework is set with a reasonable market mechanism or even taxation mechanism, but a fair level playing field from that standpoint, the market economy will adjust. They may prefer one solution than another, but whatever the solution, if it is well defined, investment will go where it makes economic sense, and the goals will be achieved in a self-funded mechanism by the industry itself and by the participants, i.e. all of us.
First of all, you have to price CO2. You will come nowhere if there is no price of CO2. So if you save CO2, you should have a reward for it. Or if you like to bring CO2 in the atmosphere, there should be a penalty. There must be a price for CO2. There are many ways to do that. As industry in Europe, we think one of the good systems is what we call an energy trading system, because that can price CO2. That can coexist next to carbon taxes, or it can coexist to, as in Europe, we have taxes on gasoline. But we think an emission trading system is the first thing you should have. Then you have the overall target, but there should be sub-targets for the developed countries. Yeah? And that, of course, should fit into the overall target. We think that the developing countries, that's the third point, they should come in via sector agreements. What is a sector agreement is that all the steel industry in the world has certain targets. How do you do that? And you can work them even them within the trading systems, or the base chemical industry, or refineries, or what have you. The fourth point is that we think that carbon capture and storage is an interesting technology. But so far, not any real large project is built in the world. There are many plans, but and we have to see whether it really works and is doing the job. Why are we enthusiastic about carbon capture and storage? Because it has the potential to be big. It can make a dent into the problem of CO2. That's what we think. And you can see it potentially as a bridge to, let's say, a real renewables longer-term future as well. The fifth one is the whole subject of biofuels. Now, you know the competition with food, fresh water, etc. In the end, you must have an understanding what are sustainable biofuels, and that has probably to do with certification for sourcing and other measures, and that we have a common view what sustainable biofuels are.
If we can put a global response in place, if we can agree to ambitious commitments broadly in Copenhagen, then the market effort to achieve those commitments in a cost-effective way will go a long way to helping us generate the resources that we need to make four pieces of the puzzle come together. And those four pieces are ambitious targets from industrialized countries, engagement from major developing nations, significant finance to get the process moving, and a governance structure that reflects the realities of today, not 1948.